And welcome to this new video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be covering the concept of a drainage basin system and what it entails. So the first question we ask ourselves is what is a drainage basin? And the answer is here. A drainage basin is basically the entire area which is drained by a river and its tributaries. So what does this mean? Let's see here. So here is a structure, a very basic structure of a river and its tributaries. We say that the point at which a river begins is known as the source of the river, and the end point is the mouth of the river. The small river valleys or rivers which join the main river will form the tributaries. So these are tributaries, these are another tributary here, another tributary. The point at which tributaries join the main river, we call them confluence. And then we say the raised ground between any two river basins, or actually two river drainage basins. We call it an interflow, which is also known as the watershed. So we are asking ourselves, what is a drainage basin? And we have seen that a drainage basin is basically the entire area which is drained by a river and its tributaries. So here, this dotted line is showing the drainage basin for this particular river. So many things happen in our drainage basin, and that's what we want to look into from the source all the way down to the mouth of the river. And in this video, I'm going to focus on the water cycle and the hydrological cycle, which are one and the same thing. So what is hydrology? In the first thing, we say that hydrology is basically the study of water as it moves. One, it's on the surface. So any water flowing on the surface, as we studied. Then we have water under the surface, and we also have water moving through the surface of the earth. This forms the study of hydrology. So basically, let's look at the water cycle or the hydrological cycle. Remember, now being a cycle, we can start it at any point. I choose to start at the point where we have precipitation. So once we have precipitation, it is where we have forms of moisture falling onto the surface. So let's assume this is rainfall. Once it falls onto the surface, there is that kind of precipitation which is interrupted by the trees, and this process we call it interception. Interception will happen when we have the precipitation trapped by the vegetation. Then we have a case whereby some of this precipitation will flow straight away to the ground, and this will be referred to as through fall. But of course, we shall have some interception at the ground here where we have some grass. Then the water which is trapped by the trees, some of it can be evaporated back to the atmosphere, but we have some of it which will drip down the stem onto the ground. This one is known as stem fall. It is a step in the water cycle. Then of course, once the water reaches the ground, we have several processes. We shall see what happens when the water is seeping into the ground. But first thing first, we have water flowing over the surface in a process which we call surface runoff, or basically runoff. And then from there we have more processes. So let us continue tracing this water until it comes back to the point of precipitation started. So let us use this model to understand exactly what happens. We left it at the point where the water had just entered the earth's surface. Then we had surface runoff. Basically, we have water flowing into the water bodies like a lake. This one here, we shall call it surface storage. Surface storage. So what happens from there? Some water will actually seep into the ground in a process known as infiltration. Infiltration is basically the seepage of water into the ground. Then once the water seeps onto the ground, we shall have two processes. One, the water can move just below the earth's surface or below the soil, and then there's this water which shall keep on flowing downwards. This process is known as percolation, whereby the water flows downwards until it flows all the way to what we call the um, underground storage. Then the flow of water down the earth surface sideways is what we call the through flow. I mentioned that here we have ground storage, but here we are talking about surface storage. Once the water reaches the ground storage, it can start moving from one ground storage to another in a process known as base flow. So at the base flow will be movement from one surface storage to another. This is another surface storage here, and then the water can move. It is accessed by the roots of the trees, can reappear somewhere in form of a spring, and then form perhaps a source of a river. But let's trace this water which is now coming to this area, perhaps trapped through the roots and then through the stem of the trees, moving upwards. Again, we have some water here which is evaporating from this exposed surface storage. Then from the trees we have transpiration, and these combined they give us the process of evapotranspiration. This is whereby water is lost from the trees and from open water surfaces into the atmosphere. Of course, once we have evapotranspiration, we have processes like cooling because of decrease in temperature. Then with time we have condensation taking place. And what happened next? I covered this one recently in one of my videos. We have clouds, and these clouds will give again what? Precipitation. Can be in form of rain, can be in form of dew, mist, fog, but basically we talk about the precipitation. So what has happened here? We have traced the water. If you remember, we mentioned precipitation. We had now the throughfall, we had the interception and all the other processes. Then after that, surface runoff took place. Then we have infiltration, and we can see this is an entire cycle. Where we have this cycle, this is now what we call the water cycle, which is the same as hydrological cycle. Let's see a simplified model here. This is what you'll see mostly in the books. They talk about this kind of a model which contains inputs, we have flows, we have storage, we have outputs, those four things. So once it rains, you can see when you have an impeded fall, this is what I was talking about as through fall. Then we have interception. Interception is referred to as storage because the water will be stored on the leaves of the trees. Then from the leaves of the trees, it can go back to the atmosphere through transpiration and evaporation. Then from there, we have surface storage. This way we are talking about things like the lakes, the streams, and then from the surface storage, then we say the water can flow on the surface. That's where we have surface flow, like stream flow. Again, we can have evaporation taking place, which is now an output. Then, of course, we are seeing the process of infiltration, the soil moisture, and we talk about flow. Percolation happens. From percolation, we have groundwater. Then flow of groundwater, we have what we call the base flow. It can go to the river channel. That's when I was talking that can emerge somewhere in form of a spring for it to form a source of a river. But all that, the water can appear, can get back to the atmosphere through evaporation and transpiration. So here I mentioned three things. We either have inputs like precipitation, it's an input, and then we have storages. Storages, interception will store some water, surface storage, vegetation storage, soil water storage. We have transfers like the through fall, the stem, flow, surface runoff. Those are all transfers. Then we have the output, and this basically forms the water cycle, and that's how I wanted to cover in this video. I thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe, share, comment. Yeah, thank you.